Listen, when humanity first stumbled into the galactic community, and by stumbled, I mean we literally crashed a salvaged alien ship into the Galactic Council's reception dock, everyone expected us to be the usual primitive Deathworld species. You know the type. Big muscles, small brains, probably eat their own young for breakfast, that sort of charming stereotype. What they didn't expect was for us to show up wearing business casual and asking about the Wi-Fi password. The Galactic Council had this whole elaborate first contact protocol. Very dignified, very ceremonial. They'd done it thousands of times with thousands of species. There were forms to fill out, cultural exchange programs to arrange, and a comprehensive 72-hour orientation on how not to accidentally commit genocide through cultural misunderstanding. Humans being humans managed to speedrun the entire process in about 3 hours. "So," said Zefkai, the Council's chief diplomatic liaison, a being that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a philosophy professor. "Your species designation?" "Humans," replied Captain Alex Reeves, our designated first contact representative, who had earned this honor through the highly scientific method of being the only one not currently throwing up from the crash landing. "Home system classification, Sol. Though we call it the solar system. Very original, I know." "Technological advancement level?" Alex paused. This was where things usually got awkward. Most species at our level of development were still figuring out fire or basic agriculture. We, on the other hand, had somehow managed to reverse engineer faster than light travel from a crashed alien probe, while simultaneously maintaining an internet culture devoted primarily to cat videos and arguing about whether hot dogs are sandwiches. Complicated?" Zefkai's compound eyes swiveled independently, a neat trick that Alex made a mental note to be envious of later. "Please elaborate." "Well, we've got FTL travel now, obviously. Nuclear weapons. Artificial intelligence. Space elevators. Medical technology that can regrow limbs. Oh, and we've got this thing called the internet where we use all of human knowledge to look at pictures of cats and get into arguments with strangers." "Fascinating. And your species' approach to conflict resolution?" This was where Alex should have mentioned diplomacy, negotiation, the United Nations, all that civilized stuff. Instead, being jet-lagged and still slightly concussed from the crash, he said, "We argue until someone gets tired, then we make up and go get food." Zefkai made some notes with what appeared to be a limb specifically evolved for bureaucracy. "And your military capabilities?" "Oh, we're excellent at killing each other. We've turned it into an art form. Actually, we've turned it into several art forms, and a few sports." This got the attention of every alien in the room. The Galactic Council was used to species that were either pacifist herbivores or straightforward predators. Humans, as usual, had found a way to be both simultaneously. "Your species practices combat as recreation?" This came from a blue-skinned being whose species name was unpronounceable, but whose job title translated roughly to Director of Things That Could Kill Everyone. "Oh yeah," Alex said cheerfully. "Boxing, wrestling, martial arts, fencing, that's sword fighting, not the garden variety. Mixed martial arts, competitive shooting, archery contests. We've got people who dress up in historical armor and beat each other with medieval weapons for fun. We call it Historical European Martial Arts, or HEMA for short." "You voluntarily engage in combat?" "For fun," Alex emphasized. "We even sell tickets so other people can watch." The Director of Things That Could Kill. Everyone made what might have been notes, or possibly prayers to whatever deity aliens pray to, when they realize they've just met a species that considers violence a hobby. But that was just the beginning of our diplomatic adventures. 3 months later, the cultural exchange program was in full swing. Humans had been scattered across various council worlds to learn from our galactic neighbors, and definitely not start any wars. Meanwhile, aliens had been stationed on Earth to study human society and culture. This is how Rebecca Stone ended up babysitting a Kethmar science team at a suburban shooting range in Colorado. The Kethmar were what you'd get if you crossed a velociraptor with a university debate team. All sharp claws, sharper minds, and an insufferable tendency to explain why everything you were doing was technically incorrect. Their leader, Crix Tal, had been studying human recreational warfare for weeks and was convinced he'd figured us out. "Your species' obsession with projectile weapons is clearly compensatory behavior," Crix Tal announced as they watched a middle-aged accountant named Bob put 3 rounds through the bullseye at 50 yards. "Primitive tool use to enhance your inadequate natural capabilities." Rebecca, who had been dealing with this kind of commentary for weeks, just smiled. She was 5'4", had precisely zero interest in explaining evolutionary biology to a space dinosaur, and was wearing her favorite sundress because it was 80 degrees out and shooting was supposed to be relaxing. "Uh-huh," she said, signing them in at the range desk. "Whatever you say, Professor." The shooting range was exactly what you'd expect from a Colorado establishment. Aggressively American, covered in flags, with a gift shop that sold everything from ammunition to bumper stickers reading, "My other car is a tank." The clientele was the usual mix of serious sport shooters, weekend warriors, and tourists who wanted to experience real American gun culture. The Kithmar science team, 3 individuals who looked like they belonged in a documentary about prehistoric predators, attracted some attention. But this was America. People had seen weirder things at Walmart. "So," Krikstal continued as they walked toward the indoor ranges, "your primitive projectile weapons. How many of your people actually possess the capability to operate these devices?" "Oh, you know," Rebecca said casually. "A few." What she didn't mention was that a few in American terms meant roughly 80 million licensed hunters, plus another 20 million sport shooters, plus military and law enforcement, plus all the people who'd never bothered with licenses but could still hit a deer at 200 yards because their grandfather had taught them when they were 12. But why spoil the surprise? The Kethmar had brought their own recording equipment, which looked like a cross between a tablet and a small octopus. They were documenting everything for their research into human primitive weapon fixation disorders. "The range officer will give you a safety briefing," Rebecca explained as a leather-faced gentleman named Earl ambled over. Earl had been running this range since the Carter administration, and had the kind of casual competence that came from spending 40 years around people holding loaded weapons. "Y'all the alien visitors I heard about?" Earl asked, giving the Kithmar the same once-over he'd give any new shooter. "Welcome to America. Hope you brought ear protection." Krikstal's translator caught up after a moment. "We require no protection. Our auditory systems are far superior to your primitive—" The sound of a 45-70 going off in the next lane cut him off mid-sentence. All 3 aliens jumped about 2 feet in the air and immediately began examining their recording equipment for damage. "Might want to reconsider that ear protection," Earl said mildly, offering them some industrial-grade hearing protection. "That was Mrs. Patterson working on her elk load. She'll be at it for another hour." Rebecca watched with barely concealed amusement as the aliens struggled with the concept of hearing protection designed for beings with differently shaped heads. The Kethmar had excellent natural hearing, which was exactly the problem when you were standing next to people shooting high-powered rifles for fun. "Now then," Earl continued once they'd sorted out their ears. "Basic safety rules. Always treat every weapon as loaded. Never point it at anything you don't intend to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Be sure of your target and what's beyond it. Simple stuff." "These are your safety protocols?" Krikstal asked, sounding like someone who'd just been told that brain surgery was performed with rusty spoons. 4 simple rules. Works pretty well," Earl said. "Been using them since before your great-grandparents were born. Speaking of which, what kind of shooting experience you folks got?" The aliens exchanged what might have been meaningful looks if you knew how to read alien body language. "We are trained in the use of energy weapons," Krikstal said stiffly. "Plasma rifles, particle beams, that sort of technology. Not these chemical propulsion devices." "Fancy," Earl said, completely unimpressed. "Well, we'll start you on something easy. Rebecca, you want to show them the fundamentals?" This was where things started to get interesting. Rebecca had been shooting since she was 8 years old. Her father had been a competitive shooter. Her grandfather had been a Marine, and she'd grown up in a family where gun safety was taught alongside "look both ways before crossing the street" and "don't stick your finger in electrical outlets." She wasn't a professional by any stretch. She worked in IT for a mid-sized logistics company, but she could put rounds on target at distances that would make most people nervous. "Right," she said, picking up a standard .22 caliber rifle. "This is what we call a small-bore rifle. Good for learning on. Low recoil, relatively quiet, accurate enough to teach proper technique." She went through the loading process, explaining each step while the aliens recorded everything with the sort of intense focus usually reserved for documenting war crimes or breakthrough scientific discoveries. "The ammunition is contained in a metal casing," she explained, showing them a cartridge. "When you pull the trigger, a firing pin strikes the primer, which ignites the powder charge, which propels the bullet down the barrel and toward the target." "Controlled chemical explosions," one of the other aliens muttered. "Typical human approach." Rebecca lined up on the target, a standard bullseye at 25 yards. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress anyone who'd been shooting for more than a few months. Sight alignment, breathing, trigger control, she said, more to herself than to the aliens. And, crack, the bullet hit dead center. Acceptable accuracy, Krixtal noted condescendingly. Though I suspect your energy weapons would... Crack, crack, crack. 3 more rounds, 3 more holes in the center of the target. Crack, 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 crack. When the smoke cleared, literally, because despite all their technology, gunpowder still made smoke, there was a neat cluster of holes you could cover with a quarter. Huh, said one of the aliens. That's what we call a good group, Earl commented. Rebecca's being modest. She shoots in competitions. Local stuff, Rebecca said, reloading. Nothing fancy. What she didn't mention was that local stuff included the Colorado State Championships, where she'd placed 3rd in her division the previous year, or that she'd been shooting competitively for 15 years, or that the rifle she was using was actually her backup gun, because her primary rifle was being worked on by a gunsmith and had optics that cost more than most people's cars. But again, why spoil the surprise? Would you like to try? She offered. The aliens conferred among themselves in rapid, chittering voices that their translators couldn't quite keep up with. Finally, Krixtal stepped forward. Very well. Though I should mention that my species has naturally superior hand-eye coordination and reaction times. This should be simple. Famous last words. 10 minutes later, Krixtal had managed to hit the target exactly twice out of 15 shots, and one of those was arguably a ricochet. The other alien had done slightly better, managing to hit the paper target even if he hadn't come close to the scoring rings. These weapons are poorly designed, Krixtal complained. The sighting system is primitive, the recoil throws off accuracy, and the trigger mechanism is inconsistent. Uh-huh, Rebecca said. Mind if I try a few more shots with it, just to check if there's something wrong with the rifle? She took the same rifle, made no adjustments whatsoever, and proceeded to put another 5 rounds through the same hole she'd made earlier. Seems to be working fine, she said cheerfully. This was when Krixtal made his first tactical error. Instead of admitting that maybe shooting accurately required some practice, he decided to double down on alien superiority. Your species may have adapted to these crude weapons, he said, but surely you have no experience with advanced armaments. Have you ever held a real weapon? Rebecca blinked. A real weapon? Plasma rifles, particle beams, gravitic pulse cannons, weapons that require actual skill and training to operate. Now Rebecca Stone was a polite person. She'd been raised in the Midwest, said please and thank you, held doors for people, and generally tried to get along with everyone she met. She was also the kind of person who'd spent her teenage years learning to reload ammunition by hand, so she could afford to shoot competitively, who'd put herself through college partly on shooting scholarships, and who'd been taught from a young age that if someone questioned your competence, you proved them wrong quietly and with style. She also had what her friends politely called a competitive streak, and her enemies called a pathological inability to back down from a challenge. So when a space dinosaur asked if she'd ever held a real weapon, well, Rebecca laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh exactly. More like the sound you make when someone asks if you know how to change a tire while you're standing next to your custom-built race car. Oh, honey, she said, and Earl winced because he'd heard that tone before, and it usually meant someone was about to get educated. You want to talk about real weapons? She bent down and rolled up the hem of her sundress, revealing what Krixtal's superior alien intellect had somehow completely missed. A compact pistol in a thigh holster, held in place by a rig that was clearly custom-made and well-worn. This is a Sig Sauer P365, she said, drawing the weapon with the kind of casual competence that made it clear this was not her first rodeo. 9mm, 10-round capacity, designed for concealed carry. The aliens stared. Earl grinned. A few other shooters had started to pay attention. Now I know what you're thinking, Rebecca continued, checking the weapon with the automatic motions of someone who'd done this thousands of times. That's a small weapon, surely not very powerful. And you'd be right, in a sense. This little guy isn't going to stop a charging rhinoceros or punch through military armor. She moved to the shooting line and set up a fresh target at 7 yards. But here's the thing about humans, she continued conversationally. We don't just carry weapons for stopping charging rhinoceroses. We carry them because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world isn't an alien death monster or a rampaging beast. Bang, bang, bang. 3 holes appeared in the center of the target. Sometimes, she said, reloading, the most dangerous thing in the world is another human who's having a really bad day. Bang. 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 Bang! 5 more holes, so close together you could cover them with a silver dollar. And humans, Rebecca continued, ejecting the empty magazine and reloading with movements so smooth they looked choreographed. Humans are really good at having bad days. She turned to face the aliens, keeping the weapon pointed downrange in accordance with range safety rules that had been drilled into her since childhood. You want to know about real weapons? I've been carrying this particular real weapon for 3 years. Every day. Everywhere I go. To work, to the grocery store, to church, to my nephew's birthday party. It's been in my purse during job interviews, in my locker at the gym, under my pillow at night. The aliens were staring at her with the kind of expression usually reserved for discovering that your houseplant has been plotting world domination. You carry weapons constantly? One of them managed. I carry a weapon constantly, Rebecca corrected. This one, though I've got others at home. A few rifles, another pistol or two, a shotgun for home defense. Nothing fancy, just practical tools. But why? Krikstal asked, and for the first time he actually sounded curious rather than condescending. Rebecca considered the question seriously. It was a fair one, really. Because I can, she said finally. Because in my country, we decided a long time ago that the right to defend yourself is fundamental. Because the police are great people doing an important job, but they can't be everywhere at once. Because there are bad people in the world, and most of them are human. And humans are clever and determined and really, really dangerous when they put their minds to it. She holstered the pistol with the same casual competence she'd drawn it with. And because, she added, my grandfather spent 4 years fighting Nazis in Europe, and when he came home, he taught my father, and my father taught me, that free people should never, ever depend entirely on someone else for their safety. The range had gotten quiet. Not silent, Mrs. Patterson was still working on her elk load, and someone was sighting in a deer rifle 3 lanes over, but the kind of quiet that meant people were listening. How many of your people carry weapons? Krikstal asked. Rebecca shrugged. Depends on the state. Here in Colorado, probably 1 person in 20 has a concealed carry license. Some states it's higher, some lower. Then you've got all the people who carry without licenses, which is legal in a lot of places now. And you trust each other with this? Mostly, Rebecca said. It works out about as well as anything else humans do. Which is to say there are occasional problems, but generally we manage not to kill each other wholesale. She paused, considering. Though I should mention that the folks who go through the trouble of getting licensed tend to be pretty law-abiding. We get background checked, we take training classes, we practice regularly. Most of us are just people who want to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. What would be a worst-case scenario? Another alien asked. Rebecca exchanged a look with Earl, who nodded slightly. Well, she said, there was that time 2 years ago when a guy with a knife cornered a woman in the parking lot outside the mall. I happened to be walking to my car. The aliens waited. I drew my weapon, told him to step back, and held him at gunpoint until the police arrived. Nobody got hurt. Woman went home safe. Bad guy went to jail. She shrugged. Worst 15 minutes of my life, but it worked out. You threatened another human with death? I presented the option, Rebecca corrected. He chose to surrender rather than continue threatening the woman. Good choice on his part. Krikstal was making notes frantically now, and Rebecca could practically see him revising whatever research paper he'd been planning to write. Your species routinely carries lethal weapons, he muttered, and uses them to enforce social order. Sometimes, Rebecca said, though mostly we just carry them and hope we never need them. It's like having a fire extinguisher in your kitchen. You don't buy it because you're planning to have a fire. You buy it because if you do have a fire, you want to be ready. But these are not your military weapons, one of the other aliens pointed out. These are civilian weapons. Right. So your military personnel carry more advanced weapons? Oh, absolutely. Such as? Rebecca grinned. Well, you'd have to ask them. I'm just a civilian. This was technically true, though she didn't mention that her brother was an Army Ranger who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan and had some fascinating stories about what modern military weapons could do in the hands of people who really knew how to use them. But surely, Krikstal said, your civilian weapons are much less capable than proper military armaments. Sure, Rebecca agreed. A pistol isn't a tank, though. She trailed off, looking thoughtful. Though what? Krikstal pressed. Well, it's just that you seem to be thinking about this wrong, Rebecca said. You keep talking about weapons like they're the important part. They are not? No, they're tools. The important part is the person holding them. She gestured around the range, where a dozen humans of various ages and backgrounds were engaged in the casual destruction of paper targets. See, you've got the causation backwards. We're not dangerous because we have weapons. We have weapons because we're dangerous. The aliens looked confused, so Rebecca tried a different approach. Okay, let me ask you something. Your people, the Kethmar, you're predators, right? Natural hunters? Of course. We evolved from apex predators on our homeworld. Right. So you've got claws, sharp teeth, good reflexes, excellent senses. You're built for hunting and fighting. Krikstal puffed up slightly with pride. Indeed. We are far superior to humans in terms of natural weaponry and predatory instincts. Uh-huh. And yet somehow humans ended up ruling their planet and building spaceships while you guys... Rebecca paused delicately. What did your species accomplish before joining the Galactic Council? The silence stretched out uncomfortably. We had developed advanced mathematics, Krikstal said finally. And philosophy, and art. That's great, Rebecca said sincerely. Really, that's wonderful. But did you ever have wars? Of course. Many wars throughout our history. And who won them? The strongest warriors, the best hunters. Right. Claw-to-claw combat, teeth and reflexes, that sort of thing. Yes. And humans, Rebecca continued. Humans had wars too. Lots of them. But we didn't win them with claws and teeth. She picked up the .22 rifle again, checking it over with practiced movements. We won them with tools. Better tools, used more cleverly, by people who were more determined to win than the other guys were. Crack! Another perfect bullseye. See, the thing about humans is that we're not really that impressive physically. We're not the biggest, or the strongest, or the fastest, or the most naturally armed. But we're really, really good at making things that extend our capabilities. She gestured to the rifle in her hands. This little rifle? It's not much to look at, but in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, it can hit a target accurately at distances where your claws and teeth are completely useless. And the ammunition is cheap enough that we can practice until that accuracy becomes automatic. Crack, 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 3 more perfect shots. Now imagine, Rebecca continued, that instead of a .22 rifle designed for target shooting, I was holding something designed for more serious purposes. A high-powered hunting rifle that can drop a moose at 300 yards, or a military sniper rifle that can hit targets at over a mile. Or... She trailed off, smiling slightly. Well, let's just say that humans have put a lot of creative energy into developing tools for putting holes in things at various distances. The aliens were taking notes furiously now. But this is still primitive technology, Krikstal insisted. Chemical propulsion, metal projectiles. Our energy weapons are far more advanced. Maybe, Rebecca agreed. Though I'd be curious to see how they perform in field conditions. Field conditions? You know, when you're tired, stressed, running low on power, dealing with bad weather, trying to hit a moving target at unknown range while someone's shooting back at you. She set the rifle down and began packing up her gear with efficient movements. See, the thing about these primitive chemical weapons is that they're really reliable. This pistol I'm carrying, it'll work in the rain, in the snow, in 100-degree heat after being dropped in sand or mud. It'll work if I haven't cleaned it in months, if I'm using cheap ammunition, if my hands are shaking from adrenaline or cold or fear. Your energy weapons do that too, I assume? She asked innocently. The aliens exchanged uncomfortable looks. Our weapons require regular maintenance, Krikstal admitted, and proper power sources and optimal environmental conditions for peak accuracy. Uh-huh. And if you run out of power? Then the weapon becomes inoperative. Rebecca patted the spare magazines in her purse. I'm carrying 30 rounds of ammunition and I can reload in under 2 seconds. If I run out, there's a sporting goods store down the street that sells more. If they run out, there are factories all over the country that make more. If the factories stop working, I can make my own ammunition in my garage with components I can buy at the hardware store. She paused. Well, assuming the hardware store is still open. If not, I can make black powder from charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter, and cast bullets from any lead I can find. Did it in high school chemistry class. The alien stared at her. You learned to manufacture ammunition in school? AP Chemistry, Rebecca said cheerfully. Mr. Davidson thought it would be a good practical example of chemical reactions. We also learned to make soap, dye, and explosives for clearing tree stumps. You taught children to make explosives. Educational explosives, Rebecca corrected. Very small ones, though Johnny Stevens did accidentally blow up his parents' mailbox, but that was outside of class time. Earl chuckled. Good old American education system, teaching kids practical skills since 1776. The point is, Rebecca continued, humans don't just use weapons. We understand weapons. We know how they work, how to maintain them, how to modify them, how to improvise them from raw materials if necessary. She slung her rifle case over her shoulder. And more importantly, we practice with them constantly. Not just military and police, regular civilians like me. We have competitions, clubs, training courses. We spend weekends teaching our kids to shoot safely and accurately. We have TV shows about it, magazines, entire industries devoted to making better weapons and better ammunition and better ways to use them. But surely your military forces are more capable than civilians, one of the aliens said hopefully. Oh, absolutely, Rebecca agreed. But here's the thing, most of our military personnel, they started as civilians. They learned to shoot from their parents or grandparents or at summer camp before they ever joined the military. She looked thoughtful. Actually, you know what? I think I'm explaining this wrong. Let me try a different approach. She pulled out her phone and showed them a video of what appeared to be a historical reenactment. This is footage from something we call a Civil War reenactment, she explained. Basically, people dress up like soldiers from our Civil War in the 1860s and recreate battles using period-appropriate weapons and tactics. The aliens watched, fascinated, as dozens of humans in blue and gray uniforms marched around a field, loading and firing what were clearly antique weapons. These people do this for fun, Rebecca explained. On weekends. They spend their own money to buy authentic uniforms and weapons. They study historical tactics and drill formations. They learn to march and shoot and camp like soldiers from 150 years ago. But why? Because it's interesting. Because they want to understand history. Because they enjoy the challenge of mastering obsolete skills. She swiped to another video, this one showing someone in medieval armor swinging a sword. This is HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. People who study medieval and Renaissance sword-fighting techniques. They read 500-year-old training manuals, they practice footwork and blade work, they have tournaments. Another swipe, another video. This time it was someone with a bow and arrow, hitting targets at what looked like an impossible distance. Traditional archery. Some of these folks can hit targets at 200 yards with a wooden bow and handmade arrows, using techniques that haven't changed since the Middle Ages. She put the phone away. The point is, humans don't just use weapons. We study them. We preserve ancient techniques even when they're no longer practical. We compete with them for sport. We analyze them, improve them, and pass that knowledge down to our children. Every human learns these skills? Not every human, no, but enough of them. And the knowledge is available to anyone who wants to learn it. Rebecca shouldered her rifle case and started walking toward the exit. So when you ask if I've ever held a real weapon, well, I've held weapons that my great-grandfather used to hunt deer in the 1940s. I've fired military rifles from World War II. I know how to load and shoot a muzzle-loading rifle like the ones used in our Revolutionary War. I've shot bows and crossbows and thrown knives and hatchets. She paused at the door. And every summer I volunteer to teach basic marksmanship to kids at summer camp. 10-year-olds learning gun safety and target shooting with .22 rifles under careful supervision. You arm children? We educate children, Rebecca corrected. There's a difference. A 10-year-old who's been properly trained with a rifle is safer around firearms than an adult who's never learned proper handling techniques. The aliens followed her out to the parking lot, still scribbling notes. This is not what we expected to find, Crixtall admitted. What did you expect? Primitive warriors, crude weapons, basic tactics. Rebecca laughed. Oh, we've got those too, but we've also got a lot more. She opened the trunk of her car and showed them a rifle case that was considerably larger and more expensive looking than the one she'd been using inside. This is my actual competition rifle, she explained. Custom barrel, precision-tuned trigger, match-grade ammunition that I load by hand to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. With this rifle and the right conditions, I can hit targets at 600 yards. That's nearly half a kilometer. Yep. And I'm not even particularly good compared to some folks. There are people who can shoot accurately at over a mile with the right equipment. She closed the trunk. But here's what you're really missing. It's not about the weapons. It's never been about the weapons. Then what? Rebecca looked around the parking lot, where a dozen other humans were loading and unloading various firearms with the casual competence of people who'd been doing this their entire lives. It's about the fact that humans have been trying to kill each other more efficiently for thousands of years, she said. And we've gotten really, really good at it. But you're not at war, one of the aliens pointed out. No, we're not. But we remember what it was like when we were. And we practice so we don't forget. She got into her car and rolled down the window. You want some free advice? When your report gets back to the Galactic Council, you might want to mention that humans don't just carry weapons for show. We know how to use them, we practice regularly, and we've spent our entire history getting better at it. Is that a threat? Crixtall asked. Nope, Rebecca said cheerfully. It's just information. What you do with it is up to you. She started the engine. Oh, and one more thing. That little pistol I showed you? In my state, I can carry that anywhere I want without asking permission from anyone. Most humans don't bother, but legally I could walk into the grocery store, the movie theater, or a restaurant while armed, and it would be completely legal. How many humans exercise this right? Rebecca shrugged. Hard to say. Millions, certainly. Maybe tens of millions. We don't keep comprehensive records, privacy rights and all that. She put the car in drive. Anyway, it's been fun. Let me know if you want to come back and try some more advanced shooting techniques. I know a guy who teaches precision rifle courses for beginners. As she drove away, she could see the aliens in her rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot and having what looked like an intense discussion. 3 hours later, Crixtal was composing an urgent report to the Galactic Council's Department of Potentially Dangerous Species. Subject urgent revision to human threat assessment, he began. Initial contact protocols assumed humans were a typical Death World species, with limited technological development and primitive social structures. This assessment was... He paused, searching for the right diplomatic language. Significantly incomplete. He thought about Rebecca Stone, 5'4", and wearing a sundress, casually demonstrating precision marksmanship with weapons she carried everywhere she went. He thought about the casual way she'd discussed using lethal force to protect a stranger. He thought about children being taught to shoot at summer camp. Revised assessment. Humans are not a primitive warrior species. They are a highly advanced species that has deliberately maintained warrior capabilities at the civilian population level while developing sophisticated technological and social systems. He paused again, considering how to phrase the next part. Furthermore, preliminary observations suggest that human combat effectiveness may not correlate directly with official military status. Civilian humans demonstrate weapons proficiency and tactical knowledge that would be considered advanced in many species' military forces. He attached his recorded data from the shooting range, including video of Rebecca's marksmanship demonstration and audio of her casual discussion of firearms, ammunition manufacturing, and defensive weapon use. Recommendation: humans should be reclassified as a Tier 2 military species with distributed combat capability. Diplomatic protocols should reflect that any human civilian may possess both weapons and the training to use them effectively. He thought about the way she'd laughed when he'd asked if she'd ever held a real weapon. Additional note: human weapons culture appears to be recreational as well as practical. They practice combat skills for entertainment and maintain detailed historical knowledge of warfare techniques across millennia. This suggests a species-wide commitment to martial capability that extends far beyond immediate survival needs. He sent the report and settled back to wait for what he suspected would be a very interesting response from the Council. Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, Captain Alex Reeves was having his own educational experiences. The Zephyrians had invited him to observe their planetary defense exercises, partly out of diplomatic courtesy, and partly because they wanted to show off their advanced military technology to the primitive humans. The Zephyrians were aquatic beings who looked like someone had crossed a dolphin with an octopus and given the result opposable thumbs. Their homeworld was mostly ocean, and their cities were beautiful underwater constructions of coral and bioengineered materials. Their military technology was similarly organic, weapons that grew rather than being manufactured, ammunition that was essentially trained creatures, defensive systems based on modified marine life. It was genuinely impressive, in a way that made Alex feel like he was watching a nature documentary about the future. "Our defense grid," explained Admiral Thelnas, gesturing with 3 of his 8 arms toward a display showing the ocean floor around their capital city, "consists of symbiotic organisms bred specifically for warfare. Each creature is telepathically linked to our command structure and can respond to threats with perfect coordination." Alex watched the display show hundreds of what looked like aggressive sea anemones, each one the size of a small building, arrayed around the city in careful patterns. "When activated," the Admiral continued, "they can generate directed energy pulses capable of disabling spacecraft at orbital distances. The beauty of the system is that it's completely biological. No mechanical components to fail, no power sources to deplete." "That's remarkable," Alex said, and he meant it. "How long does it take to grow one of those defense creatures?" "Approximately 3 of your years for full maturation, then another year for training and integration into the command network. And if one gets damaged, it regenerates over time, assuming the damage isn't catastrophic. If it's destroyed, we simply grow a replacement." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Mind if I ask how this performs against actual attacks?" Admiral Thelnas drew himself up proudly. "We have successfully defended against 17 raids by the Chromax pirates over the past 50 years. Not a single raider has penetrated our inner defense perimeter." "Impressive," Alex agreed. "What kind of weapons were the pirates using?" "Standard energy weapons. Plasma cannons, particle beams, that sort of thing. Nothing that could overwhelm our biodefenses. Alex was quiet for a moment, doing some quick mental calculations. Admiral, if you don't mind me asking, what would happen if someone attacked your defense creatures with, say, biological weapons? Biological weapons? The Admiral's chromatophores shifted to what Alex had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a puzzled expression. You mean diseases? Or poisons, toxins, chemical weapons designed to target living organisms? The silence stretched out uncomfortably. We had not considered such an approach, Admiral Thelnas admitted. The use of biological warfare is prohibited under 17 different galactic treaties. Right, Alex said carefully. But pirates don't usually worry too much about treaties. But surely no civilized species would employ such barbaric methods. Alex thought about mustard gas, Agent Orange, and a dozen other human innovations in chemical warfare, then decided this probably wasn't the time to bring up that particular aspect of human military history. Of course not, he agreed diplomatically. I was just curious about redundancy in your defense systems. Redundancy? Backup systems. Alternative approaches. What you do if your primary defense fails. Admiral Thelnas looked genuinely confused. Why would our primary defense fail? It has never failed. This was when Alex realized that the Zephyrians had what military analysts would recognize as a single point of failure problem. Their entire planetary defense was based on one approach. Admittedly, a very sophisticated approach, but still just one approach. Humans, being humans, would have had at least 6 different backup plans, ranging from what if the sea anemones get sick, to what if someone attacks from underground, to what if they use weapons we've never seen before. Well, Alex said carefully, it's just that in human military doctrine, we tend to assume that any defense can be overcome given sufficient time and creativity. So we usually try to have multiple layers of different types of defenses, such as... Alex thought about how to explain the concept of defense in depth without sounding like he was planning an invasion of the Zephyrian homeworld. Well, you might have your biological defenses as the outer perimeter, but then maybe some conventional weapons as a backup, and then close-in defense systems for anything that gets through. And then fortified positions on the ground as a last resort. That seems unnecessarily complicated. Maybe. But it means that an attacker would have to overcome multiple different types of defenses, each requiring different tactics and weapons. It's harder than just finding one weakness in one system. Admiral Thelnas made notes with a limb that seemed specifically evolved for bureaucracy. Your species has given much thought to military defense. Some, Alex said mildly. We've had a lot of practice. This was a considerable understatement. Humans had been fortifying positions since before recorded history, and had developed the concept of layered defense to an art form. From medieval castles with multiple walls to modern military bases with integrated air defense, electronic warfare capabilities, and rapid response forces, humans had spent thousands of years learning that any single defensive system could be defeated by a sufficiently determined attacker. But surely, the Admiral continued, your weapons technology is still quite primitive compared to galactic standards. Alex considered his answer carefully. He was, technically, a diplomat, and starting an interstellar incident by accidentally insulting their host's military capabilities would be poor form. On the other hand, he was also a human, and humans had a constitutional inability to let a challenge to their competence go unanswered. Would you like to see a demonstration? He asked. 2 days later, Admiral Thelnas found himself floating in the observation bay of a human cargo ship that had been hastily converted into a mobile demonstration platform. Alex had called in some favors with the human military, who had been curious about galactic defense systems and were happy to provide some educational materials. Now, Alex explained, I should emphasize that this is all completely theoretical. We're not actually going to attack anything, just showing you how human military doctrine approaches the problem of overcoming layered defenses. The cargo bay had been converted into a briefing room, complete with holographic displays and what appeared to be a scale model of the Zephyrian capital city's defense perimeter. First step, said Colonel Martinez, a compact woman who introduced herself as a specialist in unconventional warfare solutions, is reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. The holographic display lit up with detailed scans of the Zephyrian defense creatures. We analyze the target's capabilities, response patterns, communication methods, and potential vulnerabilities. Admiral Thelnas watched, increasingly uncomfortable as the display showed his defense grid being systematically mapped and analyzed. How did you obtain this information? He asked. Publicly available sources, Colonel Martinez replied cheerfully. Tourism websites, scientific papers, news articles about your defense exercises. You'd be surprised how much tactical intelligence you can gather from open sources. She gestured, and the display changed to show what appeared to be a biological analysis of the defense creatures. Based on the available information, we can make some educated guesses about potential vulnerabilities. For example, these creatures appear to be based on Earth-analog marine life, which suggests they might be susceptible to certain types of chemical agents. But chemical weapons are prohibited. Under Galactic Treaty, yes. But there are lots of chemicals that aren't technically weapons but could still affect biological systems. Industrial solvents, for instance. Or concentrated nutrients that could trigger algae blooms. Or just plain old pollution. Admiral Thelnas was beginning to look distinctly unhappy. Phase 2, Colonel Martinez continued, is what we call preparation of the battle space. The display changed to show cargo ships approaching the Zephyrian system. Hypothetically, you'd begin by introducing subtle changes to the environment around the target. Nothing dramatic, just small adjustments that degrade the effectiveness of the biological defenses. What kind of adjustments? Oh, you know. Change the water temperature by a degree or two. Alter the salinity slightly. Introduce trace amounts of chemicals that interfere with the creature's telepathic communication. Nothing that would trigger an immediate response, but everything that would reduce their combat effectiveness. The Admiral's chromatophores were now cycling through what Alex had learned were stress colors. You would poison our entire ocean? Not poison exactly. More like strategic environmental modification. And it would be completely reversible once the operation was complete. She gestured again, and the display showed the next phase. Phase 3 is direct action against the defense perimeter. Now, normally you'd use kinetic weapons, railguns, missile systems, that sort of thing. But given that your defenses are biological, we'd probably go with more specialized approaches. Such as? Well, biological systems have biological needs. Food, oxygen, waste disposal, reproduction cycles. Disrupt any of those and the system becomes less effective. The display showed what appeared to be swarms of small objects moving toward the defense creatures. These would be autonomous systems, basically underwater drones, designed to target specific biological functions. Some might release chemicals that interfere with feeding. Others might disrupt reproductive cycles or waste processing. And if that doesn't work? Colonel Martinez smiled, and Alex suddenly remembered why he'd always been slightly afraid of military intelligence officers. Then we moved to Phase 4, direct kinetic engagement. The display changed to show what looked like a conventional military assault, except that every weapon system was specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses they'd identified in Phases 1 through 3. Kinetic penetrators designed to punch through bioarmor, explosive charges that fragment into biological toxins, sonic weapons tuned to frequencies that disrupt telepathic communication. She paused. Oh, and we'd probably drop the water temperature around the target area by about 10 degrees, just to slow down their reaction times. Admiral Thelnas was now a color that Alex was pretty sure meant either horrified or about to be violently ill. This is monstrous, the Admiral managed. It's thorough, Colonel Martinez corrected. The goal is to neutralize the threat as quickly and efficiently as possible while minimizing casualties on both sides. Minimizing casualties? Oh yes. Most of those biological agents would be temporary. The creatures would recover completely within a few months. Much more humane than just blowing everything up. She gestured to turn off the display. Of course, this is all completely theoretical. We'd never actually do something like this unless we were directly threatened. Admiral Thelnas looked like he was having trouble processing this information. Your species would go to such lengths to overcome our defenses? If we had to, Colonel Martinez said. But mostly we'd prefer to just trade with you and be friends. Much less complicated. Alex stepped forward diplomatically. The point of the exercise, Admiral, is that humans tend to think in terms of multiple contingencies. We prepare for problems we hope we'll never have to solve. But to plan the destruction of an entire planetary defense system is exactly the kind of thing our military planners do for fun, Alex admitted. We have war colleges where officers spend years studying how to overcome various types of defenses. It's an intellectual exercise as much as a practical one. He gestured around the cargo bay. Colonel Martinez here probably has detailed plans for overcoming the defenses of every major world in the galaxy, just because she enjoys the challenge of solving complex problems. It's like a puzzle, Colonel Martinez agreed. A really complicated, high-stakes puzzle where the pieces are trying to kill you. Admiral Thelnas was quiet for a long moment. Your species has devoted considerable intellectual resources to warfare, he said finally. Some, Alex agreed. Though we've also devoted considerable resources to avoiding it. Turns out the best way to prevent wars is to be really, really good at fighting them. Deterrence theory, Colonel Martinez added. If everyone knows you can defend yourself effectively, they're less likely to attack you in the first place. And if everyone knows you can overcome their defenses, Alex continued, they're more likely to negotiate rather than fight. Admiral Thelmas considered this. So your military capabilities serve a diplomatic function. Exactly. Peace through superior firepower, as we like to say. The Admiral was quiet for another moment, his chromatophores cycling through what Alex was beginning to recognize as deep thought colors. Colonel Martinez, he said finally, would it be possible to review your analysis of our defense systems, not for military purposes, but to identify potential vulnerabilities we should address? Absolutely, she replied. Though you might want to consider diversifying your approach. Biological defenses are great, but they work better as part of a layered system. What would you recommend? Colonel Martinez grinned, and Alex realized that she'd probably been hoping someone would ask that question. Well, you've got excellent underwater capabilities, but what about air defense? And your biological systems are impressive, but what's your response time against multiple simultaneous attacks? And have you considered the possibility of attacks from outside normal space? Admiral Thelmas began taking notes frantically. Also, she continued, you might want to think about redundancy in your command and control systems. Right now, if someone disrupts your telepathic network, your entire defense grid becomes uncoordinated. How would one disrupt a telepathic network? Oh, there are lots of ways. Electromagnetic interference, chemical agents that affect brain chemistry, physical barriers that block telepathic signals. Or you could just target the command personnel directly. The Admiral stopped taking notes. Target the command personnel? Sure. Your defense system depends on telepathic coordination, which means you have central command nodes. Take out the command nodes and the system becomes much less effective. She pulled up another display, this one showing the Zephyrian command structure. Based on publicly available information about your military hierarchy, I'd estimate you have maybe a dozen key personnel whose loss would significantly degrade your defense capabilities. You have identified our command personnel? It's not hard. You publish organizational charts. Your officers give interviews to news services. They attend public ceremonies. Plus, telepathic species tend to have predictable command structures. You need people with strong telepathic abilities in key positions. Admiral Thelmas was looking distinctly uncomfortable again. So a targeted strike against our command structure would be much more effective than a direct assault on your defense perimeter, Colonel Martinez confirmed. Take out the command nodes first, then your biological defenses become just a bunch of confused sea anemones. Alex decided it was time to intervene before Colonel Martinez accidentally started a panic. But again, he said quickly, this is all theoretical. The point is to help you identify potential weaknesses so you can address them. Right, Colonel Martinez agreed. For instance, you could distribute your command structure more broadly, or develop backup communication systems that don't rely on telepathy, or create autonomous defense protocols that work even without central coordination. Or, Alex added, you could develop mutual defense agreements with other species, so that an attack on your world would trigger responses from multiple allies. Admiral Thelmas was taking notes again, but Alex could see that he was also thinking hard about the broader implications. Your species approaches warfare very systematically, the Admiral said. We've had a lot of practice, Alex repeated. And we've learned that the best way to win a fight is to think about it more carefully than the other guy does. But surely other species have similar capabilities. Alex and Colonel Martinez exchanged a look. Not really, Colonel Martinez said carefully. Most species tend to develop one primary approach to warfare and then refine it. They get really good at what they do, but they don't necessarily think about what happens when they encounter something completely different. Humans, Alex added, have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've tried every approach we could think of, and then we've tried to figure out how to counter every approach we've tried. It makes us generalists, Colonel Martinez explained. We're not necessarily the best at any one type of warfare, but we're pretty good at adapting to whatever we encounter. Admiral Thelmas made a few more notes, then put down his writing implement. I believe I need to revise some of our defensive planning, he said quietly. Happy to help, Colonel Martinez offered. We could set up some joint exercises, if you're interested. Nothing aggressive, just cooperative training to help you test your systems against unfamiliar approaches. That it would be very educational. Alex smiled. Great. And Admiral, you might want to share some of this information with the other Council species. I suspect they'd be interested in the concepts we've discussed. You believe other species have similar vulnerabilities? I think most species probably have blind spots in their defensive thinking, Alex said diplomatically. Humans certainly do. But the nice thing about allied cooperation is that we can help each other identify and address those blind spots. Admiral Thelnas considered this. A mutual defense and training alliance. Interesting. Just a thought, Alex said. But in our experience, the best way to maintain peace is for everyone to be strong enough that nobody wants to start a fight. 6 months later, the Galactic Council was convening an emergency session to discuss what they were calling the human problem. It had started with Krikstal's report about civilian weapons capabilities, escalated with Admiral Thelnas's analysis of human military doctrine, and reached crisis levels when 3 other species had submitted similar reports about humans who had casually demonstrated capabilities that exceeded what anyone had expected from a primitive Death World species. The council chambers were packed. Representatives from 47 different species had requested to attend, which was about 40 more than usual for a routine diplomatic review. Councillor Vetheran, the elderly Altarian who chaired the council, called the session to order with visible reluctance. "We are here," she began, "to discuss recent intelligence regarding the human species and their potential impact on galactic security." She gestured to the display screens around the chamber, which lit up with reports, video recordings, and analysis documents. To summarize the situation, our initial assessment of human capabilities appears to have been incomplete. This drew murmurs from around the chamber. Incomplete was diplomatic language for, we completely missed the fact that we've just welcomed auspices of warrior philosophers into the galactic community. Krikstal of the Kethmar will present his findings, Councillor Vetheran continued. Krikstal rose, his movements still showing the nervous energy that had characterized him since his encounter with Rebecca Stone. "Honored councillors," he began, "my initial research into human recreational warfare revealed several disturbing facts about their species." He gestured to the first display. Humans routinely carry lethal weapons in civilian settings. Not ceremonial weapons, not tools, purpose-built instruments of war, carried by individuals with no official military status. The chamber erupted in surprised chittering, clicking, and whatever sounds the various species made when they were collectively saying, "What?" Furthermore, Krikstal continued once the noise died down, these civilians demonstrate weapons proficiency that exceeds the capabilities of trained military personnel from several council species. More surprise noises. The human I encountered, a female civilian working in information technology, could accurately hit targets at ranges where our energy weapons begin to lose effectiveness. She carried sufficient ammunition to sustain combat operations, possessed detailed knowledge of weapons maintenance and manufacture, and claimed this was normal for her culture. Councillor Vetheran held up a hand for silence. "Are you suggesting that humans have militarized their civilian population?" "No, Councillor, I am suggesting that humans have weaponized their civilian population. There is a significant difference." He brought up video recordings from the shooting range. "Observe, this is not military training. This is recreational activity. Humans practice combat skills for entertainment." The chamber watched in fascination as Rebecca demonstrated precision marksmanship, explained ammunition reloading, and casually discussed defensive weapon use. "She mentioned that children are taught these skills," Krikstal added. "Weapons training is integrated into their educational and recreational systems." A Zephyrian representative raised a tentacle. "Surely this is unusual behavior even for humans." "Negative. Preliminary research suggests that millions of human civilians possess similar capabilities. Their planet has established retail infrastructure for weapons and ammunition, competitive leagues for combat skills, and educational programs for all age groups." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "Admiral Thelnas will present his analysis of human military doctrine," Councillor Vetheran announced. The Zephyrian admiral rose, his chromatophores displaying what everyone now recognized as deep concern. "Honorable councillors," he began, "human military capabilities extend far beyond superior individual weapons proficiency." He activated his own display, showing the systematic analysis that Colonel Martinez had presented. Humans approach warfare as an intellectual discipline. They study not only their own capabilities, but the potential weaknesses of any defensive system they encounter. He played back portions of Colonel Martinez's briefing, translated for the various species present. In the space of 2 hours, human military analysts identified multiple critical vulnerabilities in our planetary defense system. Vulnerabilities that we had never considered despite 50 years of successful operation. The chamber erupted again. The Zephyrian defense grid was considered one of the most sophisticated systems in the galaxy. Moreover, Admiral Thelnas continued, they presented detailed plans for overcoming these defenses, using combinations of tactics that no previous species had ever attempted. Surely such analysis required extensive intelligence gathering, asked a crystalline entity from the back of the chamber. All information was obtained from publicly available sources. Tourism websites, scientific publications, news articles. They compiled a comprehensive tactical assessment using only information that we ourselves had made freely available. This caused another round of disturbed noises. The humans explained that this level of analysis is routine for their military educational system. Their officers study hypothetical scenarios involving the conquest of worlds they have never visited, using weapons systems they have never seen, against species they have never encountered. For what purpose? Demanded the Kethmar representative. They called it intellectual exercise, Admiral Thelnas replied. They appear to study warfare for the same reason other species study mathematics or philosophy, because they find it interesting. Councillor Vethran looked around the chamber at the growing signs of panic among the representatives. Are there additional reports? She asked, though her tone suggested she hoped the answer was no. It wasn't. Over the next 4 hours, representatives from 6 different species presented similar analyses. Humans had demonstrated capabilities in areas ranging from logistics. They can manufacture weapons and ammunition in civilian facilities using readily available materials. To intelligence gathering. They have created a planetary communication network that can be used to coordinate military operations. To psychological warfare. They have developed entertainment media specifically designed to prepare their population for military conflict. The picture that emerged was of a species that had essentially turned their entire civilization into a military-industrial complex. Except they'd done it so casually that they didn't seem to realize it themselves. The question before us, Councillor Vethran said finally, is how to respond to this information. We must demand immediate disarmament, insisted the Kethmar representative. No species should possess such capabilities. On what grounds? Asked a voice from the back of the chamber. They have broken no laws, violated no treaties, threatened no one. Their very existence is a threat. To whom? They have shown no aggressive intentions. In fact, they have offered to share their defensive knowledge with other species. This was true. Following the success of the human-Zephyrian defense cooperation exercises, 3 other species had requested similar consultations. The humans claim their military capabilities serve peaceful purposes, Admiral Thelnas noted. Their phrase is peace through superior firepower. And their civilian weapons culture? They say it prevents crime and ensures their government remains accountable to the people. Councillor Vethran looked around the chamber again, noting the various expressions of confusion, concern, and outright fear among the representatives. Has anyone actually asked the humans about these capabilities? She inquired. The chamber fell silent. I believe, she continued, that we should invite them to address these concerns directly. 3 days later, Captain Alex Reeves found himself standing in the Galactic Council chambers, surrounded by dozens of alien species who were all staring at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed terror. Captain Reeves, Councillor Vethran began. The Council has some questions about your species' military and weapons capabilities. Sure, Alex replied cheerfully. What would you like to know? Is it true that human civilians routinely carry lethal weapons? Some of them, sure. Depends on local laws and personal preference. And these weapons are equivalent to military armaments? Alex considered this. Well, they're usually smaller and less powerful than military weapons. But they're built to the same basic principles, yeah. Do you not consider this dangerous? Not particularly. People who go through the trouble of getting trained and licensed tend to be pretty responsible about it. But surely the potential for violence is outweighed by the deterrent effect, Alex finished. Criminals are less likely to attack people if they think their victims might be armed and trained. The Kethmar representative leaned forward. Your species teaches children to use weapons. We teach children to use weapons safely, Alex corrected. Same way we teach them to drive cars or operate power tools. Dangerous things are less dangerous when people know how to handle them properly. But the military applications are mostly theoretical, Alex said. Most humans never serve in the military. They just want to be able to protect themselves and their families if necessary. Counselor Vetheran gestured to another display. Captain, our analysis suggests that human military doctrine is unusually comprehensive. We're thorough, Alex agreed. Is that a problem? Your officers study methods for conquering worlds they have never seen. Sure. It's good mental exercise, and you never know what you might need to know someday. Do you not find such preparation aggressive? Alex looked genuinely puzzled. How is being prepared aggressive? We study how to defend against attacks too. And how to provide humanitarian aid, conduct disaster relief, maintain supply lines, coordinate with allies, all sorts of things. But your weapons technology is designed to be effective, Alex said simply. If you're going to make weapons, you might as well make good ones. The chamber was quiet for a moment as everyone processed this casual approach to what they considered existential threats. Captain, Admiral Thelnas said finally, your species possesses the capability to pose a significant threat to any world in the galaxy. Does this concern you? Alex thought about this seriously. Well, he said finally, every species in this chamber probably has the capability to pose a significant threat to other worlds. That's kind of what happens when you develop advanced technology. But humans seem particularly focused on combat applications. Maybe, Alex agreed. But we're also focused on a lot of other things. Art, science, exploration, trade, diplomacy. We just happen to be good at fighting too. Why? Alex shrugged. Because we've had a lot of practice, and the ones who weren't good at it didn't survive long enough to have kids. Are you not concerned about the implications of such capabilities? Not really. Being good at something doesn't mean you have to use it. Humans are also really good at killing each other with cars, but mostly we just use them for transportation. Counselor Vetheran leaned forward. Captain, speaking frankly, should the Council be concerned about human military capabilities? Alex considered this carefully. It was the kind of question that could determine the future of human-galactic relations. Counselor, he said finally, I think the question you should be asking is, would you rather have humans as friends or enemies? Explain. Well, you've spent the last few days documenting all the ways humans could theoretically be dangerous. But you haven't talked much about what we actually want to do. Which is? Trade. Explore. Learn new things. Make friends. Build cool stuff. Same things most people want to do. He gestured around the chamber. The reason humans developed all these military capabilities is because we spent thousands of years surrounded by other humans who were also good at fighting. We had to be good at it to survive. And now? Now we're not surrounded by hostile humans anymore. We're surrounded by peaceful aliens who want to trade and share knowledge and explore the galaxy together. Alex paused. Look, humans have been really good at killing each other for a long time. But you know what we got even better at? What? Working together when we have a common goal. He activated the display system and brought up images from human history. The construction of the International Space Station, joint disaster relief operations, international scientific collaborations. When humans decide we want to accomplish something together, we're scary efficient at it. We can coordinate resources across entire continents, mobilize millions of people, sustain complex operations for decades. For military purposes? For any purpose. We've put that same organizational capability into exploring space, fighting diseases, responding to natural disasters, building massive engineering projects. He switched to images of human space exploration, rovers on Mars, telescopes studying distant galaxies, plans for interstellar colonies. The same logistical capabilities that let us fight wars, let us explore the galaxy. The same manufacturing base that makes weapons can make spaceships and medical equipment and whatever else we need. The chamber was quiet as they absorbed this. So to answer your question, Counselor, should you be concerned about human military capabilities? That depends entirely on whether we're working together or working against each other. And which would you prefer? Alex smiled. Together, obviously. It's more fun, it's more productive, and nobody gets hurt. But if we were to work against each other? Alex's expression became more serious. Then you'd find out why humans spent so much time learning to be good at fighting. The silence stretched out for a long moment. Captain, Counselor Vetheran said finally, what would humans want from a closer relationship with the Galactic Council? Mostly what we've been doing, Alex replied. Trade agreements, scientific collaboration, cultural exchange, joint exploration projects. Maybe some mutual defense agreements, since apparently space is more dangerous than we realized. And in return? We share our knowledge and capabilities. Help with defense planning, disaster response, large-scale engineering projects. Whatever you need that we're good at. Including military assistance? If our friends are threatened, sure. That's what friends do for each other. Councillor Vethrin looked around the chamber, noting the various expressions among the representatives. The council will need time to consider these matters, she said formally. Of course, Alex replied. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. As he left the chamber, Alex could hear the start of what was clearly going to be a very long and very heated debate behind him. The final vote came 3 weeks later. By a margin of 38-9, the Galactic Council voted to offer humanity full membership, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The deciding factor, according to the official records, was Admiral Thelnas's testimony about the effectiveness of human-Zephyrian defense cooperation. The unofficial factor, according to diplomatic gossip, was Councillor Vethron's closing statement. We can either have the humans as allies who share their capabilities with us, or we can have them as neutral parties who keep their capabilities to themselves. But we cannot have them as enemies. The mathematics are not favorable. Rebecca Stone, watching the proceedings from Earth via holographic transmission, raised her beer in salute. Welcome to the galaxy, humanity, she said to her television. Try not to break anything important. Outside her window, a neighbor was teaching his 10-year-old daughter to shoot clay pigeons with a shotgun, while his wife practiced precision rifle techniques on targets at 100 yards. Just another peaceful Sunday afternoon in suburban Colorado. The galaxy, Rebecca reflected, was about to become a much more interesting place. And humans, being humans, were probably going to enjoy every minute of it.